The world was vast, untamed, and bitterly cold. Glaciers scarred the continents, and humanity clung to survival in small, isolated bands. For millennia, Homo sapiens knew only their own kind, their own faces, their own ways, their own dreams. But then, as they pushed into new lands, they found something that shattered their understanding of the world. They found footprints that were almost theirs, but not quite. They found tools that were clever, but strangely made, and then, one day they saw them. Across a misty valley, figures moved with a familiar gait, yet their bodies were broader, their faces heavier, their presence utterly alien. This was no chance encounter with a beast. This was a meeting with another version of humanity. The shock must have been existential. For the first time, we were not alone, and for the first time, we faced a rival that looked back at us with the same calculating intelligence, the same fear, and the same hunger. This wasn't just competition, it was a collision of worlds. Imagine staring into a distorted mirror. The reflection is almost you, but the proportions are wrong. The brow too heavy, the body too thick, the eyes too deep set. That feeling of unease, that primal recoil, is what psychologists call the uncanny valley. Now amplify that to a species-level scale. These beings used tools, buried their dead, controlled fire. They were clearly people, but they were not our people. Their speech was a guttural, unfamiliar rhythm. Their symbols and rituals were incomprehensible. This profound similarity, paired with undeniable difference, bred a deep and instinctual terror. They were close enough to recognize as kin, yet too different to trust. In a world where survival depended on reading intention in a glance, these strangers were an unsolvable puzzle. That uncertainty, that inability to predict whether the next encounter would be trade or violence, created a tension that simmered for generations. It wasn't hatred that sparked the first conflict, it was fear. The fear of the other, the fear of the almost human. When two human groups meet, language is the bridge. But when Homo sapiens and Neanderthals stood face to face, there was no bridge. Their vocal tracts and cognitive structures likely produced a communication gap too wide to cross. We might have shared gestures, but complex ideas, alliances, warnings, shared myths were impossible. Every misunderstanding fueled suspicion. A misinterpreted hand gesture could be seen as a threat. A failed trade attempt could be viewed as theft. Without words to de-escalate, every interaction was a potential spark. This wasn't a language barrier like between two human cultures. It was a chasm between two different ways of being. The inability to say "we mean no harm" ultimately meant that harm became inevitable. The first war began not with a battle cry, but with a silence that neither side could break. The war between us and them wasn't fought on classic battlefields. There were no organized armies, no drawn lines in the sand. This was a silent, grinding war of attrition, a cold war that lasted for millennia. The battlefield was everywhere, in the dense forests, in the river valleys, in the very air they breathed. The first front in this war was ecological. We were competing for the same exact resources, the same caves for shelter, the same herds of mammoth and deer for food, the same fresh water sources. Imagine a Neanderthal band returning to their ancestral cave after a long hunt, only to find it occupied by a group of Homo sapiens. Our fires already burning at the entrance. There was no court to appeal to, no higher authority. This was a zero-sum game in a world of scarcity. You either found a way to take what you needed, or you perished. This pressure was constant, relentless, and it squeezed the Neanderthals from every direction. But it wasn't just about numbers or aggression, it was about technology. And this is where we held a devastating, game-changing advantage. The spear thrower, or Otlatal. Think about it. A Neanderthal spear was a brutal, powerful weapon, but it was designed for close-range thrusting. To use it, you had to get dangerously close to a massive, enraged animal like a woolly rhino. Now, imagine our innovation, a simple lever device that allowed a hunter to launch a lighter, faster spear from over twice the distance. This wasn't just a new tool, it was a revolution in warfare and hunting. We could now attack from a safe distance. We could hunt more efficiently, with less risk, getting more calories for less energy. This technological edge meant our bands could grow larger, stronger, and better fed. For the Neanderthals, every encounter with us now came with a terrifying new variable, projectiles raining down from beyond the range of their own weapons. This single innovation turned the slow-burning Cold War decisively in our favor. The final, crushing advantage wasn't just our tools, it was our tribes. Neanderthal social groups were small, isolated, and fiercely loyal to their immediate kin. Their world was often limited to a single valley. Our Homo sapiens networks, however, were vast and interconnected. Through ritual, art, and more complex language, we maintained ties with other bands over incredible distances. If one of our groups found a rich hunting ground, that knowledge could travel. If we developed a new tool, technique, it could spread. We weren't just individual bands. We were a network, a web of information and mutual support. The Neanderthals were facing an opponent that could learn, adapt, and reinforce itself on a continental scale. A Neanderthal band defeated or starved out in one valley was gone forever. A Homo sapiens band facing the same hardship could potentially get support from allies or simply move to known friendly territory. We overwhelmed them not with a single knockout blow, but with the relentless, flexible pressure of a connected species. The war wasn't won with a clash of spears, but with the silent, inexorable spread of an idea that we were stronger together. The war was never going to end with a single, glorious battle. There was no final stand, no great last charge. The defeat of the Neanderthals was a slow, quiet, and inevitable process, a death by 1,000 cuts. Every time a Homo sapiens band moved into a valley and took the best cave, that was a cut. Every time we used our outlots to hunt more efficiently, leaving less game for others, that was a cut. Every harsh winter, where our larger networks allowed us to share food and survive, while an isolated Neanderthal family starved in their shelter, that was a cut. They were squeezed, outcompeted, and pushed further and further to the margins, into the coldest, most barren landscapes, where survival was a daily struggle against the elements. We didn't conquer them through brute force alone. We changed the rules of the game, and they simply couldn't keep up. The pressure was ecological, economic, and utterly relentless. So where did they go? The last of them didn't vanish in a puff of smoke. They held on, in the most remote refuges left of them, the southernmost tip of the Iberian Peninsula, the rugged mountains of Croatia, isolated pockets where the tide of Homo sapiens had not yet reached, or where the land was too harsh for us to want. Here the last Neanderthal communities lived out their final generations. Imagine the world shrinking around them. The stories they must have told, of strange, tall newcomers who seemed to be everywhere, whose numbers never dwindled. They were the last of their kind, living ghosts in a world that was no longer theirs. And then, one day, in a cave in Gibraltar, a woman took her last breath, and with her an entire species, an entire way of being human, passed quietly out of existence. There was no one left to mourn her. The war was over. But to call it a victory feels wrong, because we didn't just eradicate them, we absorbed them. In those early, tense encounters, there weren't only moments of conflict, there were also, undoubtedly, moments of curiosity, of connection, even of love. Genetic evidence is the smoking gun. We interbred. Neanderthal DNA didn't disappear. It was woven into our own genome. Those encounters left a lasting legacy inside us, so the question isn't really how we won the war. The question is, what did we become in the process? We set out as Homo sapiens, but we didn't remain pure. We became a hybrid species, carrying the ghost of our cousins within us. Their strength, their resilience, their adaptations to a cold world they live on in our immune systems, in our hair, in our skin. We didn't just defeat them, we became them. And in doing so, we lost the right to ever call ourselves a pure species again. The first human war ended not with a bang, but with a merger, and the battlefield was our own DNA. Let's start with the basics. What gave caveman toothaches in the first place? You might think early humans had perfect teeth because their diets were natural, but the truth, tooth decay has been around for tens of thousands of years. Cavemen didn't eat candy bars or soda, but they did eat sticky fruits, starchy roots, and occasionally honey, all of which fed bacteria in the mouth. Over time, that bacteria created plaque, just like today. And if they didn't clean their teeth and they didn't, it caused cavities, gum disease, and infections. They also cracked teeth, often by chewing on bones, shells, or sand-covered meat. Some even used their teeth as tools, gripping objects, or tearing hides, which wore them down. By examining ancient skulls, scientists have found abscesses, worn enamel, and even holes rotted deep into the jawbone. So yes, cavemen had plenty of dental pain. Asterisk, here's the thing, pain is universal, but understanding it is not. Cavemen didn't know about bacteria or nerves. When a tooth ached, it wasn't dental decay. It was probably thought of as a curse, a punishment, or a spirit invading the mouth. Imagine trying to sleep through jaw pain without even having the words to describe it. No concept of cavity, no idea of infection, but what they did have was instinct and maybe even some surprisingly clever remedies. Asterisk, in 2017, archaeologists studying a 14,000-year-old human skull found something shocking. A molar with clear signs of intentional scraping, as if someone had dug out the decay using a tiny, sharp tool made of flint. This may be the oldest known dental surgery in human history. Even more astonishing, in a 7,500-year-old grave in Slovenia, scientists found a tooth that had been filled with beeswax. Yes, beeswax, likely used to seal a cracked or worn tooth and reduce pain. Can you imagine lying back while someone carves into your tooth with a rock? There was no anesthetic, just the pain, the sound of scraping, and maybe the hope that it would stop hurting afterward. This wasn't dental care as we know it, it was desperation mixed with innovation. Asterisk, so what did cavemen do to soothe the pain? Before there were dentists, there were plant sand. Prehistoric humans were masters of herbal knowledge. Evidence suggests they may have used willow bark, which contains salicin, the natural form of what we now call aspirin, clove-like herbs, which have natural numbing properties, charcoal, to scrub teeth and reduce inflammation, smoke or fire ash, possibly used to disinfect or cauterize wounds. In some tribal cultures still living close to ancient ways, people chew certain tree roots or rub leaves onto gums to dull the pain, and when nothing else worked, they might resort to pulling the tooth out. No clean pliers, no sterile tools, just a sharpened rock, brute force, and perhaps someone strong enough to yank it free. Asterisk, it sounds strange, but yes, early dental tools did exist. Cavemen didn't have toothbrushes, but they may have chewed on frayed sticks or animal hair to clean their teeth. In fact, early humans in Africa and the Middle East were found to use chew sticks made from aromatic trees, which acted as both brush and mouth freshener. They may have used animal sinew to remove meat stuck between teeth, the earliest form of floss, and tools made of bone, flint, or shell were likely used to dig out food, clean debris, or even poke at infected areas. Rudimentary, yes, but not stupid. These people were problem solvers, and pain was a powerful motivator. Asterisk, here's where things get grim. Infected teeth don't just hurt, they can kill. Without antibiotics or surgery, a dental abscess could grow, burst, and let infection into the bloodstream. The result? Fever, delirium, even death. Archaeological digs have uncovered skeletons with massive jaw deformities, holes in the bone from untreated infections, and even teeth broken off at the root. Some survived, the bone healed around the missing tooth, others didn't. The pain likely worsened until it was too much, but still, they lived, they hunted, they raised families, all while enduring this pain. Asterisk, so what can we learn from these ancient dental disasters? First, that oral health has always mattered, even in the Stone Age. Second, that pain doesn't require a textbook to be understood. Our ancestors may not have known about nerves or bacteria, but they knew that a bad tooth could ruin everything. And third, early humans weren't dumb brutes. They experimented, they adapted, they endured. A toothache might seem minor today, but 10,000 years ago, it was a life-threatening event, and sometimes, even an act of courage. Asterisk, the next time you feel a twinge in your tooth and reach for a painkiller or, better yet, visit a dentist, remember this. You are standing on the shoulders of people who suffered, survived, and even drilled their own teeth with stones, just to live another day. Cavemen didn't have clinics, but they had determination, creativity, and a high pain tolerance. That aching tooth, it tells the story of all of us. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the ancient world of pain and perseverance, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out our next video, What Did Ancient Kids Do for Fun? Until then, stay curious, and brush your teeth. So close your eyes, relax your breath, and fall asleep to the entire story of a civilization few remember but none should forget. The Thracians were not one tribe, but many, dozens of warrior clans, scattered across what is now Bulgaria, Romania, northern Greece, and European Turkey. They lived in the forests, in the valleys, and in fortified hilltop settlements. To the Greeks they were wild and fierce. To the Persians, they were worthy enemies. To the Romans, they were both threats and legends. And yet, for all their might, the Thracians never built an empire. They lived in fragmented kingdoms and chieftaincies bound by culture, but not by rule. What was daily life like in ancient Thrace? Picture this: wooden homes surrounded by wheat fields, goats and sheep bleating gently in the hills, men and women wearing colorful tunics, silver jewelry and tattoos. Yes, the Thracians were heavily tattooed, often with symbols of gods, birds, and nature. They were farmers, but also fierce warriors. They drank from golden cups, played haunting music on flutes and lyres, and believed deeply in the afterlife. Their tombs rich with treasure. Horses and weapons were built like homes for the dead. The Thracians had their own powerful beliefs. One of their most sacred gods was Sabazios, a sky deity associated with thunder and the sun. Some worshipped Bendis, a moon goddess later adopted into Greek religion. But above all, they believed in immortality of the soul. To a Thracian warrior, death was not the end, it was a passage. They sang songs at funerals, not in sorrow, but in celebration. Their tombs, many still standing today, were painted with murals of banquets, chariots, and scenes of joy, because the afterlife, they believed, was a continuation of life, not a departure from it. Thrace sat between powerful civilizations, the Greeks to the south, the Scythians to the east, the Celts to the west, and the Persians far beyond. Each of these powers tried to conquer or influence the Thracians. The Persian king Darius I invaded in 513 BCE. Alexander the Great passed through Thrace on his way to Asia. The Greeks traded but also colonized the coasts, and the Romans, they eventually absorbed Thrace into their empire. But the Thracians never gave in easily. They fought fiercely and bravely, often on horseback, armed with curved swords, spears, and passion. Though fragmented for much of their history, the Thracians did form powerful kingdoms. The greatest of these was the Odrysian kingdom, formed in the 5th century BCE. Under kings like Satis III, Thrace became a regional power, rich from trade, feared for its cavalry, and admired for its goldwork. Thracian craftsmen were world-class. They made intricate masks, armor, and drinking vessels, all of which have been found buried in tombs, still gleaming after thousands of years. Their artistry tells a story that words never could, a story of elegance and brutality, of life lived in color, even in times of war. By the 1st century BCE, Rome's shadow loomed large. The Thracians fought often as allies, sometimes as rebels. One of the most famous Thracians in history wasn't a king, but a gladiator. Spartacus, a former Thracian soldier enslaved by Rome, would lead the greatest slave rebellion the empire ever saw, though his uprising would eventually fall. Spartacus became a symbol of resistance, of courage, and of Thracian pride. Eventually Rome conquered all of Thrace. By 46 CE, it became a Roman province. Temples were torn down, new cities were built, the old gods forgotten, but the Thracian spirit never quite disappeared. Over the centuries the Thracians faded into history. Their language was lost, their names erased from records, their beliefs buried beneath Christian churches and Roman ruins, but they never fully vanished. Their blood mixed with Greeks, Slavs, Bulgars, and others who came after. Their tombs remained silent hills scattered across Bulgaria and beyond. Inside, chariots, murals, crowns, and whispers from a forgotten time. Why should we remember the Thracians? Because history isn't just about empires and emperors. It's about the people who stood between giants, the ones who lived boldly, loved deeply, and left behind more than just ruins. The Thracians were poets and fighters. They worshipped stars and sang to the dead. They carved beauty into gold and courage into stone. And though they did not write their own history, their legacy survives in every artifact, every burial mound, every forgotten melody played long ago on a wooden flute. So now, as you lie still and let your thoughts wander, imagine a Thracian warrior, standing on a hill, wrapped in a woolen cloak, his hair braided, his sword at his side. He watches the horizon, where foreign armies approach, but he does not flinch because his people are proud. His gods are with him, and even if history forgets his name, the earth will remember his steps. Sleep well, traveler. You've journeyed through a land of mystery and strength, and as you drift into dreams, the story of the Thracians hums gently in the silence. Good night.